At 04:30, the radar screen lit up with 6 hostile contacts, and the young petty officer's hand froze over the alarm button. Venezuelan warships had formed a wall directly across the USS George Washington's path through international waters. What those commanders didn't know was that they had just made a catastrophic error in judgment. If you want to see what happens when a regional navy challenges 100,000 tons of American supercarrier firepower, hit subscribe to Titan Navy, because this confrontation exposed the brutal mathematics of modern naval warfare. Within 90 seconds, every officer aboard was racing to battle stations. The Venezuelan blockade took shape. 6 Venezuelan naval vessels moved into a precise formation that military analysts would later describe as either exceptionally bold or dangerously reckless. Leading the intercept force was the frigate Almirante Brian, a 3,200-ton modified Lupo-class vessel acquired from Italy in the 1980s. Supporting her were 4 Guayamacuto-class patrol boats and a single Constitution-class corvette, each carrying outdated anti-ship missile systems with a maximum effective range of just 180 kilometers. These ships had departed their home port under direct orders from Caracas, demonstrate national sovereignty, and do not yield to American pressure under any circumstances. The commanders aboard those vessels understood the assignment. What they could not see from their radar screens was about to change everything. The USS George Washington alone displaced more tonnage than Venezuela's entire operational surface fleet combined. Yet someone in Caracas had decided this was a confrontation worth staging. While Venezuelan operators focused on one massive radar return, the Americans had already surrounded them from 3 dimensions they had not even considered. Aegis systems aboard the USS Porter and USS Carney activated their SPY-1D radar arrays, and within 0.3 of a second, every Venezuelan vessel became a fully tracked target inside the Aegis combat network. This system can simultaneously track over 100 targets and guide dozens of SM-2 missiles with precision out to 170 kilometers. By contrast, the Venezuelan ships relied on British-built DA-08 air search radars from the 1970s, incapable of detecting low-flying threats beyond roughly 60 kilometers. The gap was not measured in years, but in generations of warfare. Each American destroyer carried 96 vertical launch cells loaded with Tomahawk cruise missiles, SM-2 air defense interceptors, and ASROC anti-submarine weapons. The Aegis system had already calculated firing solutions for all 6 Venezuelan vessels, refreshing threat assessments every 0.05 of a second, with kill probabilities exceeding 95%. What made the situation truly dangerous was that Venezuelan radar operators had no idea they were already locked targeted and could be eliminated before their own weapon systems completed a firing sequence. And beneath the surface, the threat they never detected was already in position. 30 feet below the waves, a Virginia-class attack submarine had quietly stationed herself between the Venezuelan formation and its nearest naval base. These submarines cost over $3 billion apiece and carry capabilities that render surface combatants obsolete in modern warfare. Her sonar suite could detect a Venezuelan diesel engine from hundreds of meters away, while remaining nearly silent thanks to pump jet propulsion. Venezuela technically operated 2 German-built Type 209 submarines, but both had been sidelined by maintenance failures and parts shortages since 2019. That meant complete American dominance below the surface. The Virginia-class boat carried 12 Tomahawk missiles and 25 Mark 48 heavyweight torpedoes, each capable of breaking a frigate in half with a single strike. Her commander had already plotted firing envelopes and escape routes, though he hoped those calculations would never leave the screen. What few outside classified circles know is this: that submarine had been tracking the Venezuelan ships for 72 hours before the blockade was ever attempted. As dawn approached, panic set in ashore. Secure communications between Venezuela's Ministry of Defense and the Almirante Bryan lit up with increasingly urgent calls. Intelligence flowing into Caracas painted a reality the political leadership had not anticipated. Russian military advisors embedded with Venezuelan forces reportedly urged immediate de-escalation after satellite reconnaissance confirmed the full composition of the American strike group. Venezuela's entire 2024 defense budget stood at roughly $438 million. A single U.S. carrier strike group represents more than $30 billion in assets and costs over $6 million per day to operate. The math was no longer theoretical. Senior Venezuelan naval officers reportedly briefed worst-case scenarios showing that their entire blockading force could be neutralized in under 7 minutes if hostilities began. What they did not anticipate was how close they would come to triggering that outcome. Then came the critical mistake. One Guayamacuto-class patrol boat activated its fire control radar painting the USS George Washington with targeting emissions. In naval doctrine, this act sits one step below weapons release and legally justifies immediate defensive action. American electronic warfare systems detected the emission in microseconds. Within seconds, USS Porter activated her own fire control systems, achieved missile lock on all 6 Venezuelan vessels, and shared the targeting data across the strike group. The carrier's defensive posture jumped to full alert. 4 FA-18 Super Hornets on deck were cleared for immediate launch. Combat Air Patrol aircraft already airborne received weapons-free authorization pending confirmation of hostile intent fingers hovering over release switches. The entire sequence lasted 22 seconds. Then the Venezuelan radar went dark. Those 22 seconds represented the closest point to actual weapons fire. Neither nation's public would ever learn how narrow that margin truly was. The Venezuelan commander aboard the Almirante Bryan made a decision that likely saved his crew's lives. He hailed the American carrier on International Channel 16, announcing that his patrol mission had been successfully completed and that his formation would return to port after demonstrating Venezuelan maritime sovereignty. The wording was deliberate. It allowed both sides to disengage without publicly conceding ground. Venezuelan state television later aired footage claiming a successful challenge to American aggression. U.S. after-action reports simply noted that foreign vessels cleared the transit corridor without incident. Intelligence intercepts later revealed the Venezuelan commander had faced a grim choice court-martial for withdrawal or annihilation at sea if he stayed. Professional naval officers had quietly overridden political theater. The USS George Washington continued her transit through international waters without firing a single shot, proving that overwhelming power often speaks louder than weapons ever could. This standoff delivered a lesson every regional navy understood immediately. Political theater on the open ocean carries real, unforgiving consequences. If you found this breakdown of modern naval confrontation tactics eye-opening, make sure to subscribe to Titan Navy. We'll continue breaking down the military encounters that quietly reshape modern warfare doctrine. At 4:17 a.m., 3 Venezuelan warships burst out of the darkness and drove straight toward the USS George Washington. They formed a tight V-shaped wall attempting to block a 100,000-ton American aircraft carrier in international waters. Cameras were rolling. Engines were roaring. Caracas believed it had found its propaganda moment. Then the USS gravely made a move that forced those Venezuelan captains to realize they had picked a fight they could never win. Subscribe to Titan Navy. because what followed revealed the real mechanics of American naval dominance. The Venezuelan Navy operates roughly 63 vessels on paper, but only 8 are considered combat-ready at any given time. The 3 Guayamacuto-class patrol boats involved in this confrontation displaced just 170 tons each and carried a maximum crew of 22. They were facing the USS George Washington, a 100,000-ton carrier with more than 6,000 personnel. The math was absurd. Yet Caracas deployed them anyway, gambling on a single assumption that American restraint could be mistaken for weakness. What they did not calculate was how quickly the battlefield could be reshaped without a single round being fired. This encounter was never about military victory. It was about distraction. Since the launch of Operation Southern Spear, U.S. forces have seized more than 47 metric tons of cocaine in Caribbean waters, worth an estimated $1.4 billion on American streets. Every interdiction does more than remove drugs. It cuts directly into the Maduro regime's cash flow. Intelligence estimates suggest roughly 30% of Maduro's operational budget is tied to cartel partnerships. Operation Southern Spear deployed 12 warships, 4 Coast Guard cutters, and 18 P-8 Poseidon surveillance aircraft in a rotating pattern covering 2.7 million square nautical miles. Every 72 hours, these assets mapped the movement of every vessel larger than 40 feet, creating a digital net that is slowly suffocating trafficking routes. Venezuelan commanders understood this confrontation was not about winning a fight. It was about creating noise. What happened next proved that America was not just watching the water. It was controlling every layer above it. USS Gravely accelerated from 18 knots to 28 knots in under a minute, pushing 200 tons of steel through the sea with deliberate control. Her SPY-1D Aegis radar tracked all 3 Venezuelan vessels, simultaneously calculating closure rates with sub-knot precision, while updating threat assessments in near real time. The destroyer positioned herself roughly 1,200 yards from the lead patrol boat, close enough that her bow wave alone generated a 4-foot swell that rocked the smaller ships. No weapons were armed. No fire control radar was activated. Yet every Venezuelan captain understood the reality. They were staring at a warship carrying 90 vertical launch cells loaded with missiles capable of neutralizing their entire formation before they could react. The message was delivered by physics, not threats. Move or be moved. Then the pressure escalated. An MH-60R Seahawk lifted off from Gravely's deck. It carried a multi-mode surface search radar capable of tracking contacts out to 150 nautical miles and a forward-looking infrared system sensitive enough to detect engine heat, human movement on deck, and even thermal changes from weapon handling. Every sensor feed streamed directly into Gravely's Combat Information Center, where operators viewed the battlefield in 4 dimensions: position, speed, heading, and intent. The Venezuelan crews saw a helicopter overhead. What they were actually facing was a flying surveillance network documenting every throttle change, every gun mount rotation, and every nervous movement on deck. Modern naval warfare is not decided by who fires first. It is decided by who sees everything and makes the opponent understand that fact. As distance closed, the encounter entered a legally critical zone. Inside 4 nautical miles, collision risk becomes indefensible, and claims of self-defense gain immediate legitimacy under maritime law. The Venezuelan lead vessel pressed inward until it was barely over 3 nautical miles from the carrier. Inside Gravely's Combat Information Center, the Aegis system calculated a dangerously close point of approach if neither side altered course. The computers predicted a 73% probability that Venezuela would break formation within minutes. Radio silence dominated both bridges. Speaking would have meant ownership. Gravely then transmitted a single procedural warning on an open maritime channel. Nothing dramatic, nothing threatening. It simply marked the legal boundary and shifted responsibility squarely onto the Venezuelan commanders advancing through the dark. What followed was not a tactical retreat. It was mathematical inevitability. The lead patrol boat reduced speed. Gravely's sensors registered the throttle change within seconds. Thermal imagery confirmed the engine cooling moments later. The two trailing vessels mirrored the deceleration shortly after. The V-shaped formation sagged, then collapsed entirely. No radio calls, no signal flags, just three silhouettes turning away and opening distance. The USS George Washington never altered course. She never reduced speed. She never raised weapons beyond standard cruising readiness. Venezuelan state media would later frame the encounter as a success, but radar tracks told a different story. Three patrol boats approached with aggression and departed with urgency. The encounter cost Venezuela credibility, exposed the futility of theatrical naval tactics, and reinforced a simple reality in the Caribbean. American carriers do not ask permission to transit international waters. They simply transit. And smaller navies move aside or learn why they should have. Three Venezuelan warships tried to make history. Instead, they became a lesson in why you do not challenge a superpower that controls the sea, the sky, and every sensor in between. The USS George Washington never flinched. USS Gravely never fired. And the Seahawk never stopped watching. For more real-world breakdowns of naval power and maritime confrontations, subscribe to Titan Navy.